Hi, I'm Steve Bell. Welcome to the MedTech Mavericks podcast. And today you've got a very exciting guest with us today, which is Blue Goat Cyber, which you're going to learn a lot about in the next 30 minutes or so. So we have with us today Christian and Trevor. So first of all, just introduce Blue Goat Cyber, introduce yourselves, let us know what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I'm Christian. I'm the founder and CEO of Blue Goat Cyber. This is my second cybersecurity business. My first one I started in 2014. It was called Alpine Security, and we did medical device cybersecurity with that company as well. So I've got a little over 10 years experience now with medical device cybersecurity. I sold Alpine Security in 2020 to a publicly traded company, and then had a health scare. When I was working for that publicly traded company, I developed 6 blood clots in my left leg, and thanks to a Doppler ultrasound, they were able to quickly diagnose it. So a medical device was responsible for that diagnosis, and that device was compromised or was offline. I may not be here today. So that those blood clots basically put me in a bit of depression because I used to do a lot of active stuff and I couldn't do anything but sit around. But after I got out of that depression and made some decisions, I decided to form Blue Goat Cyber and spin off the medical device cybersecurity for the parent company. And that's where we are today. And I think Trevor has a kind of a similar story about a medical device saving his life when he was younger, also. So I'll turn it over to Trevor to do a quick intro.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Trevor Slattery. I'm the director of medical device cybersecurity at Blue Goat Cyber. I handle a lot of the technical things and make sure that everything's going on track. I come from originally an application security background, and luckily those skills translate pretty well to medical device security. Similar to what Christian had mentioned, when I was younger, I had a pretty severe case of tachycardia. I had a resting heart rate of about 240, which, as I'm sure you could guess, not too good for you. So was able to get that treated, but it often comes back even after treatment for up to 2 years. So for those 2 years, I had to wear a portable EKG monitor and EKG leads 24/7. And if something had gone wrong with that, if something had happened, the tachycardia came back, and that EKG monitor was compromised, it was not able to actively alert that something had happened, might be a bit of a different circumstance from what actually happened.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, it's really interesting, but in medical device, most of the most successful companies and the best motivated people are people who've had a personal impact of something that's been with a medical device because they really you feel it and you're motivated. So that's very interesting to hear that you've both actually been very much in contact with medical devices, so that's inspired that. I got to ask the question, Blue Goat, where does the name Blue Goat come from?
So Blue Goat comes from the fact that I like to climb mountains, and then like I've done 2 of the 7 summits, the highest peaks on each continent. And every time I climb mountains, I see goats, and goats are always trying to like get to the next level. You've probably seen pictures of them up in trees on these
Yeah.
steep cliffs. They're very persistent, very resilient, and a little bit stubborn. So I think those are good qualities for a company. And they're always trying to get to the next level. And then when I'm in the mountains, the blue sky against like the white snow-covered peaks is like very calming to me. Blue is a very calming color for me. And it looks cool in the
Okay.
mountains.
Awesome. Awesome. You know, um, I have a big interest in this because I do deal a lot with surgical robotics and healthcare robotics, advanced AI, and different health systems. I think one thing that people who are listening, not everyone's going to be fully up to speed on cybersecurity, exactly what it is, and specifically with respect to medical devices, and how that might be different from your bank account. Can you give us some flavors and backgrounds on cyber, especially in medical devices?
I'll let you take this one, Trevor.
Sure. One thing with medical devices, a typical cybersecurity attack, you're trying to look for information. You're looking for credit cards, you're looking for a social security number, anything that you can use to leverage against the person to try to get money or to extort them somehow. Ultimately, cybersecurity is, well, I guess offensive cybersecurity coming from a criminal is treated as a business for them. They need to find a way to make money. The alternative, and this is typically what we see with a medical device, is trying to cause harm to someone. So it's possible to cause direct, immediate harm to a patient. There have been cases, I know, a pretty famous example is Dick Cheney had a pacemaker, and he had all of the wireless functionality removed from it because he was afraid that someone could assassinate him through his pacemaker. Later, it was proved that those pacemakers were vulnerable to attack, and someone can use targeted signals to change the pace of the pacemakers and essentially just kill someone remotely. So the risk with a medical device in cybersecurity is pretty huge compared to a typical system. And that's why it takes a lot of focus and a lot of care to make sure that nothing slips through the cracks and these devices are super secure.
Thank you. And so in terms of cyber, everyone thinks it's some kind of computer driven distance attack. I mean, is that always the case, or are there local attacks? What's sort of the way that people try and do this, try and attack the systems?
There can be a lot of different ways to go about attacking a system. Often the available method of exploitation is what determines how feasible it is. So in one case, like you said, it can be over the internet. I can do, something from 1,000 miles away, and it all just goes through the internet into that remote network. Sometimes that's not possible. There will be an air gap device, an air gap network. And when that's the case, sometimes you need physical access. And there are a lot of tools that build into that physical access, little hot plug keys that you can plug into a device that run a bunch of dangerous scripts super quick without anybody noticing. But it depends on the device. Typically, we say as long as there's a computer running, there is a way to attack it. It's really close to impossible to write perfectly bug-free code, but our job is just to make sure that we find as much of that as possible.
Okay, so that's interesting, because again, whenever I'm generalistic and I'm not that smart on cyber, so this is great for me. I always think to myself, well, the system's sitting in a hospital OR, so no one could ever get to it, right? No one's ever going to be able to get in there and get to it. I guess that's not as true as I probably would like it to be.
We consider them hostile environments from a cybersecurity perspective. They are notoriously insecure and unsecure. So we just assume that the medical device, that it's going to be on a network somewhere, typically is going to be constantly attacked. And even in a physically enclosed room, like an operating room, if there's physical access to the device, it could be even a field technician or normal procedure where they're transferring an image from the device via USB drive. If that USB drive is infected, that could possibly infect the drive as well. So it could just be a normal user trying something, but with an infected, malware on a USB key.
Okay, yes, it's really interesting, because I think we often think that somewhere in an OR is going to be so super secure and a hospital is going to be so super secure, but I guess with just so many people running around with access to everywhere, that probably turns that on its head. So that is good to know, and I think that'll be interesting for a lot of the people listening to this, because there's a lot of us in the industry think that the nature of the fact that it sits in an OR, no one's ever going to get to it. So that's, I think, very interesting.
Yeah, the most secure part of a hospital is the NICU, where the babies are, from my experience.
Right.
We used to do a lot of testing where we try to break into hospitals, and we've been able to get into the ORs and everything but the NICU.
So you guys, you don't just sit there on a computer at distance and try and hack into stuff. What do you actually do? Sort of, what does the company do to do this kind of testing and attacks? What do you guys do?
It depends on the kind of test that we're doing. So, like the example that Christian mentioned, oftentimes at the hospital, they'll require a physical penetration test, and that's actively trying to break into the building, get to secret areas, get to special information, and seeing how sneaky you can be while you do it. Typically, with a medical device, it's a little bit less of that blind approach and a more collaborative approach. So we'll take a device and we'll either work on it remotely or go work on it in person, depends on what the device is, and work hand in hand with the developers, let them know what we're seeing, give them some advice on remediation, and help them work to a better path for security for their device. So we're not just trying to go in and cause problems and say, see, we did it, and then leave. We go in, make sure that developers, network engineers, all of these involved people know what we're doing and know how to make it better.
That to me says something about the fact that if it's remedial, it's kind of like late and you're going backwards. Again, I've been in many startups, and I think it's not been on the forefront of everyone's mind. Cyber, it kind of is a thing that's quite late in the development, and quite often probably not just before the day of FDA that you put it into the FDA, but it's fairly late in the process. What's your thoughts around when should people be thinking about the whole cybersecurity of their devices?
Ideally, they think about it from the inception of their device in the design phase. Traditionally, people wait to the very end. They kind of like forget about cybersecurity, like, oh no, we forgot about cybersecurity, and they try to bolt it on, which rarely works. It often causes a redesign because there was a design decision made sooner, or way back, like maybe even a year ago, that it has to be redone basically. So the sooner they think about it, the better. Ideally, someone comes to us when they're starting to design and develop their product versus at the very end. Unfortunately, most people come to us like a month out from their submission date or maybe 2 months out. And then as Trevor mentioned, we test stuff. We typically find a lot of problems and they don't have time to fix everything because they have to get the risk down to an acceptable level in terms of patient harm for the FDA, and they can rarely do that in like a 30 or 60-day period, and that delays their submission and it ends up costing them much more money. So they would spend less money uh, and get their product to market much quicker if they thought about it from the inception.
And you mentioned the FDA, and the regulatory bodies.
Yeah.
I've seen a huge ramp up in the last couple of years of what they seem to have a very big sensitivity around that. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the mood music at the minute?
With the FDA and with all of these regulatory bodies, we have EU MDR, the Korean PMDA, Japanese PMA. They're all trying to kick up their focus on cybersecurity. There were some recent cyber attacks in 2022 and 2020 that showed the need for a lot more increased security. A lot of medical devices were compromised. A lot of hospital networks were compromised through insecure medical devices. So the entire industry saw that something needs to change. That's why all of these regulatory bodies are increasing the requirements and trying to make sure that these devices get out into the market safe the first time around. Right now, most of that has gone across pretty much anywhere you can sell a medical device. Those policies are already in place. The big struggle right now is trying to retrofit these new policies onto old devices. And that is the current conversation in the room a lot of the time, is trying to figure out how can we account for these old devices that may have not had the same strict requirements for cybersecurity? What concerns are there? How can we get around it? And how can we implement these new policies into these old devices that may have not gone through that initial testing and don't have the same design controls? So right now, there's nothing official on a proper solution. Lots of ideas are going around, and it seems like something will come to at a certain point from a regulatory perspective. But for now, we're just trying to get ahead of it as much as we can. Anything else that gets submitted from here on out is going to be much more secure than it once was. And then finding these old devices, trying to get them through regular testing, regular monitoring is helping to bridge that gap as well.
It feels like there's an increasing awareness, from the regulatory side of it for cybersecurity. And it seems like people are leaving it to the last minute, which is probably not a good thing. And you advised to get in touch with you a lot earlier in the process. And you talked about design choices. One of the things I often get asked about, and I have no clue about it, is people ask me about, operating systems, base operating systems, and should they go with something that's more of a well-known operating system, or should they write their own bespoke operating system? What's the kind of general feeling there?
It depends on the use of the device. So probably what we see as the most common operating system is Windows IoT. It's very easy to use. It's cheap. Everyone's familiar with Windows, and it is a security nightmare. Anytime we have a device with Windows IoT, we can get in, cause tons of problems. We've had situations where devices running Windows IoT have no memory protections. And what that means with a device such as a surgical robot, in this case, it was a high-powered laser, you could turn off any safety precautions on it and make the strength of the laser as high as you want without a built-in cooling safety mechanism, and effectively just burn someone remotely. So Windows is what I recommend people shy away from unless they are definitely solid on their Windows security. Now, moving into a lot of other devices, we see a lot of embedded systems that need real-time operating systems. There are a lot of options around there. Depends on the application. I know Safe RTOS is one that I like to recommend for that application. It meets all of the safety requirements for an FDA medical device and meets EU MDR specifications as well. Moving into a little bit more of a high-level operating system, there are tons of different Linux builds, which can often be a little bit more customized. And those may introduce a little bit less risk, but again, it's a similar situation to Windows. You have to know what you're doing, you have to set it up properly, and you have to test anything that could go wrong. So I guess ultimately the concern is less what the operating system is, more how you're managing it, as long as that operating system isn't Windows.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. And then again, so the final sort of area that I'll talk about before I work out how people can get hold of you, because I think, when I hear this, people need to get hold of you. So um, there's a lot more people want to put stuff on the cloud. Okay. So they always talk about AWS and different things. Is there anything particular around cybersecurity threat where people are trying to push stuff on the cloud versus edge, or what's kind of the current thoughts on that?
There is a false assumption that the cloud is inherently more secure than an on-premise network. Cloud networks have some more security features built in, but oftentimes that means that they get neglected from a security perspective. So there are a lot of things that can go wrong, a lot of configurations that need to be carefully noted. Access control is a really important situation in the cloud, making sure that not just anyone can get access to sensitive information, even internally. There's no reason that everyone's access to the cloud network should be the same. A couple people should have that high level administrative access, and then everyone else should be pretty restricted. And that prevents someone in human resources getting attacked with a social engineering attack. Then they're able to branch off into that development environment and catch any set of credentials and gain full access to the cloud. So securing it in the same way you would secure a traditional network is very important. As far as the deployment, there are tons of advantages to having it in the cloud. It's often a lot easier to set up. It requires a little bit less work as far as maintenance. And it's quick to deploy, redeploy, deploy in a different environment. So it's pretty scalable, pretty flexible. And so I definitely understand why a lot of people do it, but same as anything else, it's just important to have the right security considerations in mind.
It's clear that this is hyper specialist. It's being thought about often too late by people. It's a changing environment day by day. So they need to get hold of people like you. So how can people get hold of you? If people are sort of watching this and thinking, maybe we need to do something about our cybersecurity, what's the best way that they can get hold of you?
They can go to our website, bluegoatcyber.com. And on there, we have a link to schedule a meeting with us. It opens up our calendar. And we also have a form where they can submit a form. We can call them or email them.
Again, I know it's very early for you there. And so thank you very much for doing this early on. And I would encourage everyone, especially on the robotics side of things. I know a lot of the startups out there have not thought about this now. So I do encourage them to reach out to people like yourselves and at least just try and understand where they're at and what they need to do. So thank you very much for both being on. Thank you for being up early, as I say. And thank you, Christian. Thank you, Trevor. And yeah, thanks from the MedTech Mavericks podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Steve.
Yeah, thank you.